Hey there guys and girls, before we get into this video, if you wish to support me on Patreon, you can now do so. Go into the description below, find the link, and I hope you become a patron. It's an offer you really can't refuse. The Godfather on PS2 is one of those overlooked classic movie games that's surprisingly fairly decent, and I'm not just saying that with my nostalgia goggles on, since I recently played it and spent 40 hours on it. The Godfather was first announced by Electronic Arts on May 10th, 2004. The only thing released about the game at the time is that it would be an M-rated game, making it EA's first ever M-rated title. And then that opened the floodgates to everything we have now. Slated to be released in the year 2005, the game was delayed and then released in 2006 by EA's Redwood Shores, I got it right, and published by EA. A whole 34 years after the original Godfather movie. The game came on PS2, Xbox, and PC, and was later re-released for PSP, 360, Wii, and PS3. It tells the story of your character Aldo's rise through the Corleone family and his eventual reign in an open-world environment. It takes the form of the events that happened off-screen in the original movie, like putting the horse head in Jack Wart's bed, you know, spoiler alert for a 40-something-year-old movie. If you haven't seen it, which you definitely should, the first Godfather is a classic. The game was a commercial success, selling over 2 million units and garnering praise and well-received comments. The original idea was a project for Paramount, and surprisingly, Paramount didn't consult the director, Francis Ford Coppola. They just went out to EA and said, "We're thinking of making a Godfather game," and it wasn't until later that Francis Ford Coppola found out about it and was against the game from the start. So Paramount approached EA for the game adaptation in the early 2003. After numerous meetings, the concept was decided to add a dual story game that would feature a character moving through an open world while also rising through the ranks of the Corleone family, furthering along the plot and following the movie, if you guys have seen it. Take out following the Godfather movie and we pretty much have any other game out there. Far Cry, especially Far Cry 3, you start off as a captive and you rise through the ranks. Assassin's Creed, you start off as a lowly assassin, rise your way through the ranks. We've seen the story 1,000 times and we will see the story 1,000 times more. In 2009, The Godfather 2 was released for the last-gen consoles and PC. I played it. It wasn't very good, and the critics agreed. It received a critical panning and led to the scrapping of a third release. The Godfather recently released a mobile game, which is your standard pay-to-play style, expand your territory kind of game. We've seen it with Final Fantasy. Pretty much any game gets one of these, or any series gets one of these, movies get one of these. It's just, they're infesting the system. So the first things I want to note is I am running this on an emulator, the PC SX2 version 1.4.0, with my own settings and options for my build and the way the game likes to run on my system, and it may be different for any other system. So if you see some graphical glitches like roads changing and lights showing up through the walls, that's just my emulator and me not getting along some days. The game looks good for any second-gen console, but that's not a bad thing. There's a fair amount of customization with your characters, from choosing scars, hair, any kind of tuxedo, dress, suits. There's detail enough that if you've seen the movies, you know exactly who everybody is. The game world is standard for an open-world game of the era, sparsely populated, giving it a feeling of hollowness and emptiness. There's recycled NPC models, often 3 or 4 grouped together. You see a lot of that in older GTA games. Just, to give an example, go play Vice City and you'll see it all the time. Go play GTA 3, you'll see it all the time. San Andreas, you'll see it. There's a good amount of vehicle traffic, but it's not an addition most of the times. It feels like they're in your way and adding an unnecessary challenge while driving. And yes, you may say, but that's what they're supposed to do. Here it feels almost like it's a vindictive challenge, not a, oh, let's make this mission, difficult by throwing in. No, it's just the game being like, oof. There's some physics and collision issues with people standing through walls, clipping through objects. The draw distance is okay at best, especially with NPCs in buildings rendering in a few feet from them, although buildings are a little better where they will render in a few 100 feet away from them, or 100 feet, whatever the game unit measurement is. In buildings, really, you just don't look at the buildings you're driving by. They're corridors rather than a live city. I also experienced one glitch with hair textures. I had my camera behind my character, and I was on my phone and I happened to look up, and his hair was gone and he looked like the doll head toy from Toy Story. It was frightening. Combat here is a weird one. Instead of the buttons being kick, punch, like most standard games, it controlled with the right analog stick. Kind of like fight round 3 or round 3 fight night, something like that. I have the game, I can't remember the name. It takes a little getting used to, but the gun combat is super easy, and that's where they spent most of their time. It's a solid lock and fire system. There's no remapping of the buttons, so you are quickly forced to get used to it. There isn't a huge variety of weapons, but there doesn't need to be every gun under the sun here. It's set in a 1940s realistic period with realistic period weapons. Go watch the movie if you don't understand what I'm talking about. There are tier weapons to go through, from the base guns to golden guns, and you can purchase in the real world, but they're pretty expensive, especially the Dillinger. It's $750,000. The AI in fights aren't the brightest. They run towards you while you camp out in the corner a la Mafia 3 style, but the same breath, if you're not careful, you can be easily killed by not being in cover or running into a room that you thought was clear with multiple guys in there and getting mowed down in seconds, which does decrease your vendetta level with the other families, but can be a pain in the arse, especially with how some mission checkpoints are laid out. My only gripe in the game, combat-wise, is the forced stealth sections. While not plentiful, they are there. The one I have to gripe about is the one where you put the horse head in Jack Warrett's bed. It's not overly hard, but there is a lot of guards you have to avoid and a lot of housekeepers, and you have to crouch, and if you run, you get heard. It's just frustrating. And the way the checkpoints are laid out are not, they're just, they're just frustrating. While it's not the only section like that, that one was the most frustrating, and I'm obviously not a fan of forced stealth anyway. I wouldn't really say there's vehicular combat. It's more of you driving and then the other people shooting, and that's only in missions. It's completely a solo game. You don't get no crew to back you up or anything. Although the driving physics do feel a little stop and start-ish, the physics are almost there but not quite, and getting hit and then trying to steer or overcorrect always leads to a crash. Every single time for me. Maybe I just suck at driving in this game. And it's the only game I've played, though, I will give the vehicular combat or the vehicular driving this, where you honk the horn and cars will actually move out of your way, although slowly. Sometimes you end up hitting them anyway. I wish GTA had that. I would love cars to move out of my way. Like, I got places to be, you don't move. If you wanted to crash other cars while they're chasing you, it's totally doable, although most of the times they will just run into something themselves. It allows you a little bit of that, but not much. Most of the time you'll spin out, your car will get shot up, you'll have to escape before it blows up, and you'll pray that there's another car there so you can get into it or steal it and get away before you end up dying. So most of the sounds are from the movies. The soundtrack is pretty much from the movies. There is no in-game music soundtracks in the cars or anything like that, so it's just classic Godfather everywhere. As soon as you drive up to the Corleone compound, you'll hear that classic Godfather trumpet piece start playing. There were new lines recorded for most of the characters for the game, but some also were old spliced in lines from the movies, especially for Marlon Brando. He was so sick recording the lines for this game that they were completely unusable, and then he died shortly after, and his dialogue had to be pulled straight from the movies. So, overall, this game took me about 40 hours, a little over 40 hours to complete with a 99.5% finish rate. The only thing missing were a few film rolls and one execution style that I tried so hard to get all of them, and I don't know how I didn't get them. The execution style I thought I got multiple times, and the film rolls I had a little guide and I still apparently missed them. But is it a 40-hour game? No, God no. But this game does what a lot of games do. They have you go to an area and then put the mission on the other side of the map, and there's no fast traveling, and it takes forever to get to there, especially if traffic just does not want to comply with you. If there was fast traveling or even better traffic and driving systems, this game would be half the time, or it would be more enjoyable and you would drive around maybe more, especially if it had an in-game car soundtrack. That would be awesome. I also found myself waiting for the in-game clock a few times. So every Sunday, in-game, you get a tribute payout, and sometimes it's just easier to stand there and let the days pass and get the tribute to buy something instead of doing a mission or a hit, because sometimes you don't know how much money you're going to get from a mission or a hit, and you know how much you're going to get from a tribute. It tells you, and it's just easier to sit there and wait for it sometimes. Go on your phone, play Flappy Birds or whatever people do on their phone that, I don't know, whatever. There's also a basic upgrading system at work. As you level up through the family, you take over the businesses and rackets and further progress through the game. You can upgrade your fighting, shooting, health, speed, street smarts up to 10 times each, giving you various benefits, and they're relatively easily earned, and you max out at about level 50. Although at, I would say, maybe the halfway or level 7 of each skill, you really don't notice any severe gains by leveling up. So that's something to keep in mind there. There's also an in-game day and night cycle with time implementation. Only a handful of missions are affected by this, but they're really actually not, because the game will jump you to the time that you need to meet these people. It's not like GTA where you have to be there at a certain time or you're not going to be able to play this certain mission. It will jump you to the time. Now, as you play and you take over businesses, rackets, warehouses, hubs, and then finally compounds, your vendetta level will rise with the other families. The other families are the Brazzini, the Cuneo, the Stracchi, and the Tattaglia. Or the cops. You can also raise your wanted level with the cops. Wanted level, heat level with the cops. And they'll attack you on sight if your heat level is high enough. Or until you take the family over. If you raise your heat level enough, you can start a mob war where you either have to bomb a certain amount of businesses or bribe an FBI agent. Most of the business takeovers are done on your own time and are not mission related, like Saints Row 4 where you go out with your homies and you can do all the missions together. It's mandatory that you do take over the businesses if you want 100%, and if you want to finally, get rid of these families, although there will still be some, straggler NPCs throughout so you can do some combat, but you will, in a sense, take out the families by completing all the businesses, completing all the rackets, taking over their hubs, their transport hubs, their warehouses, and then their compounds. The compounds are they're not easily done. They can be a challenge to do, which is fair because they are the heart of these families. Each business has a racket inside of it. It's either upstairs or downstairs, and it can range from gambling to prostitution to smuggling to all these kinds of stuff that you have to take over as well. You can also perform hits on other families' members, and there's bonuses to complete with the hits. And if you kill the target a specific way, you might get $30,000 instead of $5,000. So if you can do the hits the way specified. Did I mention the game is also not easy to get around in? What do I mean? Yes, the map is well thought out. There's 5 areas. There's New Jersey, Hell's Kitchen, Midtown, Brooklyn, and Little Italy. Which, okay, if I had to go, And if it was more tightly knit, I wouldn't complain about the map so much and how long it takes to get around. But they're not that close together. Oh, it's frustrating. And sometimes you find yourself running more than walking, especially if you know you gotta go from one corner to the other. You find yourself just running there because you know it's gonna be faster than finding a vehicle or trying to find the vehicle that you like that's super fast and getting there. So it took me about 6 minutes IRL with minimum traffic using the fastest vehicle in my area to get across the map. And that's not a bad thing because we see that all the time in games like GTA, Witcher 3. If you can find, a certain way, the map, you can get away faster, but it's just the way they have one mission here, one mission there, just spread it out. It's just like, ugh. And I feel like the New Jersey area is completely unused. I feel like there's hardly, if there's a mission in there, I don't remember it. There's multiple collectibles as well, ranging from execution styles, rackets you have to take over, businesses you have to take over, safes cracked, and safe houses you bought, and bonus film reels, which are just clips from the movies. There are a lot of little things to do in the game that make it feel packed, but it's not packed. It's very Mafia 3, where there's a lot to do, but not a lot to do, or GTA, where it's get to this point and that point. There's not a lot to do in the open world once you finish the missions. There's 15 main quests, and I feel like there's more than 20 hits, especially because some of the hits feel like Radiant quests, so maybe that's numbers skewed. I forgot to keep track. So you spend most of your time going around, getting the businesses, and stamping out the other families. That's really all you're doing. Let's not beat around the bush here. This game is a go here, do this, and take care of this along the way. We've seen it many times over, and we will see it again and again. Far Cry, Mafia, Assassin's Creed, Witcher, Saints Row, and countless other games are guilty of this. It's not bad design. It's just, in conjunction with everything else in this game, it's annoying. And it specifically pads out the game time. And, if you're like me and want to get all the collectibles, it can become a wee bit tedious. So, in conclusion, I feel like I'm writing an essay. You don't have to be a fan of the movies to play this, but if you want to understand what's going on, especially the way the game skips around in the story, it would definitely help to watch the movies. And plus, The Godfather, the original, is cinema masterpiece. You have to watch it at least once in your life. They are long movies, yes, but if you don't want to watch the other three, watch Godfather 1. That is beautiful, beautiful movie. I've seen it multiple times, just like Scarface. It's one of those movies you just gotta sit down and watch at least once. Even if I will say they do have very boring parts, but they're good movies. And this game follows a lot of that, and it also cuts in between, so like I said, you don't have to be a fan of the movies to watch them, but if you have, it'll make everything easier to understand. It also fills in a lot of the gaps that happen and introduce or re-show characters from the movie. Even for me who's a fan of the movies, the game feels really thrown together in some places. Some places it's just like, okay, I don't know how we got here. It doesn't do like 3 months later kind of screen thing. Just like, oh, we're here now. Where I knew that was years ahead in the movie. So keep that in mind. This is definitely a more driving and story game than anything. To get around efficiently, you need to drive. To save, you need to drive to safe houses. To get to missions, you need to drive. Like I stated, it's not a bad thing, but it really pads out the runtime of the game and leaves you bored to having to drive here and there, especially with no in-game radio or no non-movie soundtrack. And the movie soundtrack, if you haven't heard it, is a lot of orchestral pieces. Not grand orchestral pieces, but the trumpet, the iconic trumpet sound, there's a lot of that. And, it's not so bad if you have your own music playing, but sometimes when you gotta record, your music might pick up and you don't want that, so 40 hours of no music playing in the background. Like I said, at 40 hours, it was really an experience worthy of the Godfather title. It's not a bad game by any means, and it's an early EA title and the first ever EA M-rated game, which deserves some credit, but it's an average movie tie-in game. It plays average, sounds average, has an average story, especially the way it jumps around into the movie story, which is a shame because the source material is cinema legend. Now that I've played it, I can finally lay this one to good rest. It was a fun look back, but for me it has no replayability. because I've seen it, I've done it, and yeah. Would I say play this game? I would say definitely play this game. It's a history for EA, it's Godfather history, and it's not horrible, but I gotta say, if you're not a fan of this style of game or the source material, you really should pass on this one.